It's Yanni Hamburger, and we are back with the Midnight Circuit. Tonight, going to be a very interesting interview. He is the host of Horror Hangouts on Substack and Big Slick Adventures on YouTube. Of course, I am talking about the one and only Josh Cuny, and we're going to talk to him here in just a moment.
The darkest secrets lie deep at the bottom of the ocean. Join Yanni Hamburger, Edna Ville, as they comb through the macabre of Poseidon. From famous shipwrecks to modern-day ocean lore, you'll be swimming in dangerous tides. Board the ship on YouTube today.
And we're back with Josh Cuny, who is at Horror Hangouts on Substack, YouTuber. You're another one that's a horror renaissance man, just like the rest of us, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't know about Renaissance, but I try to be. There's always somebody I look up to and like, God, I wish I was as good as they are. Whether it's writing or YouTubing or
Oh yeah.
what have you. And like, but no, I'm like a little pimple on the butt end of horror right now. So
Well, I feel you because I feel like I'm the same kind of person. Just we're just here at the
right.
But tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got I met you through Horror Hangouts, obviously. How you got that started, or just anywhere else you want to give your origin story, go right ahead.
Well, as far as before getting on Substack, I guess I'll start back with the YouTube channel, which is called Big Slick Adventures. And I started that about, God, 4 years ago. And it started off as just a travel channel because I like watching travel videos on YouTube. And I thought, well, whenever I go out of town, particularly my wife and I will go to Vegas quite often and do videos, do whatever, food suggestions, all that. But I was interested in doing other things. And I watch a ton of different horror related YouTubers and decided I wanted to do something like that. I just didn't want to make a separate channel. So I decided, well, I'm going to make a series of videos called Horror Hangouts where I have guests on and kind of like what you're doing here. Sometimes it's one on one conversations like we're having. Sometimes we have group discussions, which are quite fun. We just had one last week where we discussed our favorite summer horror movies that aren't necessarily Friday the 13th because that's like too obvious of a one.
Yeah.
And during that time, around 2023, I decided, called it a midlife crisis or whatever, that I wanted to start writing horror stories. And so I got into that. I have two books that are now self-published on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble. And then a friend of mine, acquaintance on I know from Instagram, Stacy Lane Wilson. I can't remember her she's going to murder me because I forgot her Substack page. But anyhow, she had told me that she's starting a Substack, and I thought about doing the same thing eventually. So I figured, well, okay, I'll dive in, and that was back in January, late January, that I started that, and I think it's been a good experience. I figured, well, like this be a good way because I was at the point where I had my own author website because that's what they say you've got to do. Well, I'm paying $25 a month and getting no traffic. So it's like it's not doing me any good. I can't justify the money. So I figured I could use my Substack page almost like a website. I can occasionally, promote my books or whatever while writing any type of movie reviews, horror related articles and whatnot, and just kind of put that one in and hopefully meet other like minded horror fans and, you know, build another audience like I have in other social media platforms. So, and here we are today. It's what now, August 2nd. So,
So, what got you into horror, basically?
well, for me, for my generation being a Gen Xer, I was about 5 years old And I grew up in a small city in Indiana called Fort Wayne, which is in the northeast part of Indiana. And you got to remember, this is back before cable television was really a thing, or it was in its infancy, and only like maybe 8% of households even had cable. So you had four or five channels. And in our case, we had a local, you would have that local channel that would just play wherever they play. And every Friday night, there was this one station called Channel 55. Every Friday night, they would, about 10 o'clock, they would show one of the old black and white horror films every Friday night. And my mom would let me stay up and watch. And the very first one was that I watched was Dracula from 1931 with Bela Lugosi, and it just kicked it off right there. You know, Frankenstein, Wolfman, all those movies, and I just really loved the being in a different. It had the same kind of a similar effect of me when the first time I watched Star Wars, for example,
Yeah.
being taken to another place, another time, another setting. That's not at the time 1979. And then there's like just the atmosphere, the fog, the old castles, these weird European accents or whatever. Bela Lugosi, and there's a certain, even though we look at, they're not very scary to us for the most part, but they do have a certain creepiness to them, and it just kind of just built. Then over the years, before I knew it, I was watching, like I progressed from decade to decade. I started watching the old creature features from the 50s, like the Godzilla movies. And then I started watching, because there was another local station that every Saturday afternoon would have like your more of your late 50s to 60s horror films. So I would see some of the Hammer films and some of these goofy B movie creature
Yeah.
features like Land of Thousand Ants or what are these giant ants killing
That
people
was
or whatever.
that was my UHF station as well. Just Saturday
Right.
afternoon, it was those weird 50s creature from the Black Lagoon
Mm-hmm.
type movies, and then you get the ones at night. Did you have a horror host growing up?
Yeah, I mean, very bland one. We're not talking anybody like Elvira or Joe Bob Briggs or anybody like that. He was like some guy, poor guy. They probably just threw this big black cloak on him. You couldn't see him face, and he would talk in deep voice. He would introduce the movie, tonight's feature film, Bride of Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff, and that's all you'd see from him. Maybe he would come in at the end. Well, you just watched Bride of Frankenstein. Next week we're gonna watch Wolfman versus Frankenstein meets Wolfman or whatever. So it wasn't like Joe Bob where he would in between commercial breaks would give you some background on the movie or educate you. This
Or
guy was just some probably studio intern. They threw a big black cape on and said, "Just go out there and do this."
I always love to ask that question, especially of people that are around my age, because it's kind of at the end of when everybody had like their Saturday morning
Mm-hmm.
clown guy, and then your Saturday night horror host. Ours came out of Charleston, I think. And he
Okay.
actually he played along. I mean, he wasn't quite Svengoolie, but he tried to be like Svengoolie.
Okay.
That's the one thing I love asking everybody
Oh
is
yeah.
that time. It's like, hey, you know,
I asked that question too because depending on what generation we're talking with, it can be a different answer. If it was someone like me who was born 1974 or whatever, chances are you more than likely got your fix probably on one of those local UHF stations, more than likely.
that ironically, I actually work in the station now that I used to watch religiously as a kid, which is great. I mean, they converted into a radio station when they moved to the beach, but uh, it it's nice. You get to see a whole bunch of fun stuff. But um, when it comes to your start as a writer, what
Mhm.
problems did you have at first? What were the hurdles you had to overcome?
The biggest hurdles, really, writing wise, is doing the dialogue. I like, describing the scenes, describing the actions, But writing the dialogue can be a little tedious. It's a necessary evil because obviously you're setting things up. You're setting up the characters, giving them some depth so you get a look into them. It can just be a little bit tedious, and I've kind of like figured out how to get past it. Met a writer at some horror convention. He said what he does what's called 20-minute sprint. And what he does is if you start getting stuck, set your clock or whatever alarm for 20 minutes and just write. Just write. Don't worry about how good it is. Don't worry about grammar or anything. Just write until that alarm goes off. And then you can go back and see if it's any good or if it needs to be editing. But it's a good way to kind of get your brain flowing a little bit.
What's your favorite?
And you can do 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Just, it's just like a good little wind sprint kind of, I guess, or stretching exercises before the big race.
Yeah, one of the favorite things I've seen a lot of people use now, the Pomodoro timers. Mine I think it's set 25-5. I think it's what I know, but I love the sprints of absolutely brilliant idea, especially for people that are just starting out, like not knowing what to do. But moving over real quick, what's your favorite subgenre to write?
That's an interesting point because I'm not even sure. I have found out within my first couple books. Actually, I've written 3 stories, but one's just a fan fiction story since obviously nothing I'm going to publish. But I'm like trying to think because the first one is a horror western. It's basically a supernatural slasher style set in post Civil War Texas, basically, called the Hangman of Darkness. So, and that's pretty straightforward type of story for the most part. Just, this guy, instead of using a knife, his big shtick, he's a supernatural demon that's come back from the grave that likes to hang people. And then the other story is called Tales of Castle Vasile, which is 7 separate stories that are all in various different time periods, different cities, but they're all intertwined together because they set around this vampire. And that's very much what I would call erotic horror because there is a lot of sex in it because I figured why not? Well, a person that I first got to know, she would like on another place called Neo Books, she would like as I was writing Hangman, I would like publish each chapter and hardly anyone would read it except this one lady, and she would read it and give me feedback. So I figured, well, I might as well read her stuff. And she wrote erotic fiction. And so I'm reading it. First thing to my mind is I didn't think it was legal to write this stuff to start with. And I think to myself, well, this goes, I mean, I'm sure I'm not the first to do it, but this goes hand in hand with horror, particularly if I want to write a vampire story. Because you think of those early 70s movies like Vampire Lovers and Vampirus and all that. And even like Interview with a Vampire has it's a little bit more covert, but there's a lot of eroticism in that movie as well. And so I figured, well, that's what I'm going to write with this story. And it dawned on me, well, what is my favorite subgenre? And it seems like I like writing period pieces because, like I said, this one that takes place in the Old West. You've got this one that varies from late 1700s Scotland to early 1600s Romania, Italy, turn of the century New Orleans. So I'm writing in all these different time periods, a couple of them, in modern day, but so I think that might be my shtick going forward is writing in different time periods. It doesn't even have to be that far. It could be in the 1980s, which is almost 50 years ago now, which makes me feel even older, but
you and me both.
Yeah. And when I watch movies, I really like, Robert Eggers doesn't always hit all the marks for me. I like watching something like Nosferatu, for example, which my favorite of his. I do like The Witch. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. But I like the period settings and all that. And Ty West has done a little bit of that with going back to the 80s, doing something like House of the Devil or doing like Pearl, X, and Maxine. Um, I like that stuff anyway to watch. So, yeah,
Yeah, that was it. Late Night with the Devil. I think that.
that's another good one.
Oh, absolutely. And the set was just picture perfect because I was sitting there and looking at like the old Dick Cavett sets, and I'm like, wow, did you just watch the 2, 3 days worth of Dick Cavett shows to get it's just perfect.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. But burnout is obviously a big problem with all of us
Hmm.
in writing. What's your way of either preventing it or getting through it?
Well, I've been kind of on a hiatus as far as writing fiction. I'm kind of got started on writing. I'm going to write probably an anthology next. It's going to be a series of different short stories that all take place on horror stories that take place on a holiday, and once again a specific time in history. So I've already written one that takes place on Memorial Day weekend in 1984 Miami. So if you like Miami Vice, if you like 80s Giallo, that's kind of where I'm going with that one, or went with it. But then I did kind of get burned out on it. So my whole thing is, well, if I'm taking a break from writing the fiction, and I am for the fun of it right now, adapting a screenplay to Hangman of Darkness right now. I don't. It's a million to one shot that anyone's gonna do anything with it. But it was just something to do. Um, I would say if you're getting stuck in a writing rut, like say if you're writing fiction, I would say then find something else to write about. So even though right now, like I said, I put out maybe about one post a week, maybe two on the Substack page. And if anything, even if I'm just writing some goofball review about a horror movie, or right now I'm doing a series where I'm kind of going through each subgenre and giving my recommendations for each one, just something like that at least just keeps your writing brain keeps your that part of your brain in, you know, keep it in shape, I guess you could say. So it's just like, I guess if you're a marathon runner and get burned out all the heavy training, then at least go for a walk or something. Then if you're not going to run, just go walk the neighborhood, which that's another good exercise to do just to keep yourself calm. There's some other things one could do, but they're illegal. So
Yeah,
depending
unfortunately.
on what state you live in, anyway.
Yeah, that's the sad part about living around here is most of it's illegal. Uh, but
Well, depending on what state, I do take
uh,
CBD gummies,
mhm.
which are THC free, so they're legal where I live. So they do help a little bit, but sometimes if it calms you down too much, it might hurt your creativity a little bit because a lot of times, particular horror writers, were writing from a sense of anxiety or some sort of negative experience and so forth. So sometimes that can be a hindrance. I don't know. I don't know if it was Stephen King who said it or some author said it, write drunk and then edit sober or something along those lines. So,
Well, I mean, if it was Stephen King would actually be the perfect one to say that. I mean, how much of it was written on cocaine, right? Uh,
yeah.
but that actually leads into a really really interesting question that I like to bring up every once in a while. Um, what makes something memorable to you, especially in horror? I know for me, the best horror I love is the ones that can actually happen in real life, like the I Spit on Your Graves and things like that.
Hmm.
What about you? Just
Hard to put a finger on it. It's really a combination of a lot of things. It's just whatever type of horror movie can draw me into that world successfully. And I can't really put I can't quantify exactly what they do, but a couple good examples is I would say Halloween and Hellraiser. I'm going to give those two movies an example because I always say Dracula and Frankenstein made me fall in love with horror. Hellraiser and Halloween made horror my favorite genre. So I watched those probably when I was around 13 or 14 or so. But Halloween, there's something about that movie probably because of the atmosphere. It's the fall, it's Halloween decorations, it's all that just in a lot of ways, even though maybe the story's a little bit, it could happen, I suppose. I mean, if you shoot someone 6 times, he's not going to walk back up and go walk away. But
better not.
yeah, unless he's got a cowboy vest.
No.
But it's a very realistic setting, and that's probably what draws me in. And the characters, I think it helps having very good characters that are relatable, and that's what will draw me in. Same thing with Hellraiser. It's such a disturbing movie from start to finish, even in the most ordinary scenes. And it all has to do with that house they're in. That whoever picked that house picked the perfect house because it's a weird looking house to begin with. You can tell it's very much a type of house, I guess, that you would see in England around that time. Really just cramped, but you have some good, interesting characters. The Kirsty character is like, I've had a crush on Ashley Lawrence since 1988. So, so right off the bat, that kind of helps. But you got this weird thing going on between Larry and his wife Julia, and got his brothers upstairs with no skin lurking around in the thing. And then on top of that, you got these demons that will drag you to hell and make you suffer for the rest of eternity, which that in itself isn't very realistic. At least I hope it isn't. And once again, I can't really say. Maybe it's the music. Sometimes the musical scores can draw you in, whether it's Christopher Young's score with Halloween or Hellraiser, Carpenter's score with Halloween, or even Goblin's score with Suspiria. I mean that score that's a score that doesn't get talked enough about.
It doesn't.
That I mean, musical scores can make or break. Definitely make a movie even better. We saw that too with Jaws is another great example. But it's hard for me to quantify. I think it's just the combination of the relatability of the characters and just the atmosphere itself. The atmosphere and the music can just draw me in, and the story's just, it doesn't have to be, Citizen Kane or anything, but if it's a well written story with compelling characters, that will draw me in. So I hope that answered your question.
No, I'm glad you brought up the music because I got into a roundtable in another podcast earlier and talking about would that shower scene in Psycho actually be as memorable without that music in the background? The ring, ring, ring,
No, because that music is every bit as it's a very simple. There's nothing overly complicated about that sound at all. But you remember it just as much as you remember the imagery. It's the same thing with, like, once again, Halloween. When you think Halloween, one of the two things you're going to think of is that just little simple 2-3 chord piano progression that Carpenter's playing. And that's all you need.
Everybody's got to do it around Halloween. Just that do, 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 do. And
Right.
you're just sitting there going, nope, that we know exactly what that is.
Well, and even too, like something as simple as in the Friday the 13th movie, when you hear that kill, kill, kill,
yes.
that little sound effect alone is one of the more memorable things about that franchise. So once again, it doesn't even have to be a musical score; it can just be basic little sound effects.
No, absolutely. Just because I mean, we've got a host that does that every Friday the 13th. He goes in the air and goes, "Ka, ka, ka, ka." It's like, okay, you've done it for 10 years. But what about tropes? What are some of the tropes? Because you and I have probably been watching horror all of our lives, basically. What are some of the tropes that's either A, your favorite that you wish you'd see more, or B, it's time to stop with that particular trope?
I don't know if I have a favorite trope. I think a couple tropes are forced jump scares that happen for no other reason than to try and get a cheap scare out of you. There's too many to give an example. I could give you a jump scare that works. Once again, going back to Halloween, where Loomis is hiding in the bushes and those kids are up the house, and he like yeah, get your ass away from there. And then he turns in their Sheriff Brackett and it startles us, but it's a natural jump scare that works for the most part. So that's one. The other one is, and I think they've kind of moved away from this a little bit, is that the final girl always has to be the squeaky clean virgin type. I think
Yes.
that gets old real quick and sometimes it gets overplayed. I think they've already kind of moved on from that. I mean, certainly the character of Maxine played by Mia Goth is no virgin.
No, you're right though, because I think because you and I kind of similar on this one, because the bimbo and the himbo, I am
Mhm.
just so tired of why. I get it, it's a male dominated genre, but
Right,
why
right.
do I have to see blood covered tits for absolutely no reason?
Well, if there's a reason, I won't object to it. I will say I do. Don't get me wrong. I definitely respect the final girl
100.
um, character 110% because it has given. I mean, if you think about it, horror is kind of the first genre to really embrace a female hero,
Yes.
I guess you could say, on a consistent level. And it wasn't always like that. It really didn't start until probably around the 70s, maybe.
That's yeah, that's
Um, but it's just ways. Sometimes I think with recent movies, they just have a final girl just for the sake of the final girl. Where, all right, Laurie Strode, Nancy Thompson, Kirsty Cotton, any one of the final girls or final guys for that matter in the Friday the 13th series, they all earned the right to survive at the end of the movies. I'm seeing some movies where we're just going to make this person the final person, and that's it. Whether or not they're likable, relatable, if they're flat out annoying or just totally incompetent throughout the entire movie, doesn't matter. We want them to be
yeah.
standing just so we can say we have that trope. Sometimes it's best. I think there'd be movies that would be better if there was no one left standing, to be honest.
You know what? That's a good point. I kind of want more threads type movies where there is no happy ending. I'm actually would love to see that. But we get, of course, now that we're getting close to the end here, it's always the questions that I truly love asking as a fellow content creator,
Mhm.
a fellow YouTuber. I know there's people out there that want to start, but they don't know where to start. What's your best advice for them to just get started?
Just, I would say pick something that you're going to enjoy doing and just have fun with it. Because if you pick something that you think is going to be popular and you don't enjoy it, people are going to see right through you that you're faking it.
Yeah.
And I think that what I love so much about a lot of the horror related YouTubers I watch, you can tell these people have a real passion for what they do, and that rubs up, and it's why they have 1,000, 2,000 followers or whatever. Um, that's the hard thing I have is I have such a monotone voice and so forth. It's hard for me sometimes to get my excitement out of me because that's just not the way I'm programmed. But that's why I do best with. I can't do a solo video by myself. It's just not going to work. I have to have people I can feed off of. But I would say number one, just try to obviously the obvious thing, try to make sure the video looks right and make sure the sounds good. At least they can at least hear you. It doesn't you don't have to spend a bunch of equipment or anything, and just have fun with it. And I would advise to find someone to don't start off doing it by yourself if you don't think you can do it. Find someone you can work off of, whether if you just want to have a co-host, a regular co-host, or have a string of guests like what I do.
Mhm.
Do that, and I just start off that way. Just treat it like, all right, we're a couple people that are sitting down at a bar or at a cafe or whatever, and we're just going to have a conversation about whatever horror movie or whatever topic they're wanting to have, and treat it like that, and don't even worry about what the audience is doing or whatnot. So that's what I would say.
Well, I see the clock has already started on the Zoom, so yeah, I'm not paying for it. Uh,
Mm.
So I gotta ask this question since we're running out of time. Tell everybody where they can find you and what the future holds for Horror Hangouts.
Well, okay, you can find me. Well, see, on YouTube, it's Big Slick Adventures, and like I said, I've got my horror hangout videos there. I have like in sections. But if you also like to see videos of Las Vegas, you can see that. I also have some cooking videos on there, me barbecuing a turkey or ribs or whatever. I'll throw anything on there that comes to mind. So you can find me on YouTube there. You can find me on Substack under Horror Hangouts. Um, I can't even remember my handle at Instagram, but just keep it on Substack anyway because I have more followers on there than I do Instagram anyway. So that's really where you can find me. I suppose I think my handle on Instagram. Give me 1 second, I'll tell you. I had to change it once, so it's like I'm bad about remembering that stuff.
Oh,
It is on Instagram. You can find me as Josh 1974 underscore horror author.
Okay.
There you go.
We'll have that. By the way, we'll have that
where
down in the show notes for everybody, so that way.
Yeah.
We can
And as far as what's going on with the Horror Hangout, I have some videos lined up. I have an author that's gonna be coming on in a couple weeks. And have another group discussion this time about our favorite final girls and final guys, actually. And then we are going to have one in September. A group of us, Substack or Orphanax, are going to have a group discussion on there, and hopefully a first of many because there's so many different people on there that I'd like to have on, and a lot of them are in England. So that kind of like this is gonna be at least 3 or 4 I know from England. So I'm just gonna have an all England panel at some point. Or I'll have to have it like at noon or whatever my time, but that because I think that'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, so that's what's coming up there as far as the YouTube channel. As far as the Substack page, I'm doing a series now. I just released part 2 today of kind of like horror movies for novices because they always have that. I always see someone say, "What's a must? What's a must? What horror movie should I watch if I'm getting into horror?" And I'm like, I don't know. There's only been 10,000 of them made, so I dropped them down into subgenres. Last week we did vampires. This week I'm focused on Stephen King and Edgar Allan Poe adaptations. Next week I'll probably go into maybe gothic horror, ones that don't fit in the vampire other stuff. Yeah. So we'll eventually do slashers and so forth. They'll probably take me once a week going into October, but give me some material to use. But that's what's going on there.
Absolutely. And Josh, as always, we appreciate it here at the Midnight Circuit. And I tell everybody this, you always have an open invitation to come on back on.
Excellent. I always look forward to it then.
Right.